Hello, everybody. I am Robert Rose, and I am the Chief Strategy Officer at the Content Advisory and the author of the brand new book, Content Marketing Strategy: How to Harness the Power of Your Brand's Voice. And well, the best advice I ever got was negotiate for what you want, not what you think you can get.
Ooh, I love that. Negotiate for what you want, not what you think you can get. Well, I got
That's
you
right.
on the show and I wanted this and I got a copy of your book. So this is good. But where did you learn that? Who gave you that advice, Robert?
That was my grandfather. My grandfather
Oh,
was chock-a-block full of great advice for me, especially as I became a young man. Like when I moved out of my house when I was, I literally graduated college and I mean, almost walked off the graduation stage, got in my car and drove to Los Angeles because I wanted to be a rock star. And that turned out about as well as you think it might. And so the key was my grandfather. I had a really very close relationship with my grandfather, and he just filled me with life advice. And so much of what I learned and came to learn about being adult in life was really due to him. And that was one of his things. He said, always negotiate for what you want, not what you think you can get, because it's always, it's so much better to leave them feeling like they won and you feeling like you won. And always, if you think you left money on the table, as long as you're happy, then it's okay.
I think that's really solid because often we think win-win, but we actually gave up so much that even though we won, we actually lost. And that sucks, huh?
Yeah. It's so, if you negotiate for what you want, if you sort of stay focused on what it is that you really want, and they're willing to give it to you, but you think you could probably get more money or get more things that you don't really care about out of them, then what are you doing? Like, the key is, what are you doing, right? Why are you asking for those things? That's what you sort of have to ask yourself, is why am I asking for those things? Is it because I need them to lose this negotiation, or because I feel like somebody will think less of me, or somebody will, ultimately think I failed if I didn't get X or Y or Z. But ultimately, if you got what you want out of a negotiation, out of any negotiation, whether it's asking for a job or asking for a raise, asking for a deal, getting paid for what you do, whatever it is, if you get what you want, then you got what you want.
Yeah, and that is a win. Ultimately, that's all we need
Ultimately, yeah.
to win. So love that. Love that. Well, congrats on the book. So it's fantastic. Lots of
Thank you.
awesome insight in here. I'm disappointed though, Robert. I'm looking, man. I don't see any more insight from Grandpa. What's up with that?
There actually is. It actually opens up the very first page, which you probably
Right.
skipped by.
Yes.
The
Of course.
very first page is dedicated to my grandfather, and advice to one of the pieces of advice he gave me was, whenever and this was basically because I was such an F up, right? I mean, I was not a successful guy when I moved out here. I was like, a ne'er do well, as he might say, right? And what he said was, he would always chide me, and he would say, "Hey, listen, what experience have you created for somebody today?" And what he meant by that, it took me years for me to figure out what he meant by it. But when I finally figured it out, was what he was asking was, what have you done to create something positive for someone today? Because the key is, if you create something positive for someone today, that means not only are you creating something positive for someone, but you actually get to experience the thing yourself. And so he was always big on, how do you create something positive, some sort of positive experience for anyone every single day.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. Well, that's a great place to start with our content journey here. I mean, if we
Sure.
can be helpful, right? If we can help someone, we can possibly, I don't know, actually win, right? Actually
Yeah,
get what we want. So
that's
so
exactly
talk
it.
to me. Yeah, so you're a rock star or
No.
wanted to be a rock star. No,
Yeah, I
come
wanted to be a
on.
rock star.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? You wanted to be a rock star, turned content marketer. So any similarities there between rock and roll and content marketing, Robert?
100%. 100%. It's when I was, so the mistake I made, and this goes right to the advice that he gave me, was I was mistaking function over form. And what I mean by that is that I came out thinking that the only way that I could really be happy was if I was, playing music on a stage, or writing, films for, for the movies and all those things. And what I recognized was after, and this again was years later after I had been in marketing for some number of years, was I was doing everything that I dreamed of doing. I was just doing it in a different form. In other words, when I thought to myself, wow, what are the activities that I do? What is the function of what I do as a living? Like, what do I do? Well, I get up on stage and I get to tell stories. I get to write every single day and try and create valuable experiences for people. I get to teach and work with technology and figure out how, the geeky part of imagery and music and words and all those things fit together into digital experiences. Well, that's exactly what I wanted to do as a rock star. I mean, that is the definition of what a rock star does every single day, to sort of create entertainment for their audiences. The only difference is it's just a different form that I'm doing it in. All I'm trying to do is educate and help people make make better of their work lives. And so it's the similarities in what we do every day are very, very, very similar.
Definitely. Cool. So with that, I've got to ask before we get too deep into the book here, have you written any songs, Robert?
Have I written any? Yes, sadly, too many. Yes, yeah,
Too many,
probably.
really?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So now I was what they would call more of a composer than a songwriter. So I did lots of film music, TV music, theater, soundtracks. I did a soundtrack for a cabaret show. So it was lots of like musical composition, but not a lot of sort of classic, singer-songwriter stuff. So, I mean, I did do that too. Those were really bad, and I don't sing at all. But yeah, more of the classical. So I made whatever money I made in music was all for soundtrack stuff.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So now that you're, I would say one of the most prolific content people I know. I always enjoy your work. I always enjoy your writing. So with that, like, talk to me about how that actually, how's that changed now with AI, Robert?
Oh, I think changing, right? I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's definitely the that participle, but it is, I think the story has yet to be written, I think, for the most part. And I think what we're starting to just begin to see is the value of the human contribution, right? In other words, I think one of the positive aspects out of this is that it's forced us to examine the value of original ideas and how we express those ideas, right? Because AI can only know what we've told it, right? So AI can only express that which we already know. Um, and so, it can combine ideas and it can sort of find patterns perhaps that we haven't explored before. It can come up with different ways of saying something. But ultimately, the original expression of an idea is going to come from today, from the things that we know today in the context of the now. I wrote a piece on this not too long ago where I sort of borrowed from Dr. Seuss, and I said, look, no one is you-ier than you, right? And so the only way that you can differentiate against AI is to become more of who you are today. And so when we think about that, it's kind of forced us to look at the human ideas and the expression of those ideas and how valuable they really are. And for some, it's pushed us hard, basically pushed us hard to get better at what it is we do, to add more, insight or ideas or creative expression to what we do. And for some of us, it's been able to say, oh, this is now a helpful tool for me to expand all the wonderful things, in the way that the way that I'm doing it. And so I think that tension between those two things are really where we are today, and just trying to sort out where it's all going to ultimately settle into. I think it's, so it's a hard question. It's a hard question for anybody to answer right now. What amuses me so much are how many now, armchair Monday morning quarterback experts we have, all these experts in AI that we now have, which is like, really? You're an expert in the thing that was literally is less than a year old. You're now an expert and you're going to teach, it's like, it's a little crazy.
Yeah. No, it's a lot crazy. It's a lot crazy. And it's so interesting that the whole you-ier than you is so important and
Yeah,
such a key point of harnessing our brand's voice. Is first, let's back that up. We have to define our brand's voice,
of
which I think
course.
a lot of folks haven't done, and then harness it. So talk to me about that, Robert. How do we first define our brand's voice?
It goes right to the idea of what we were just talking about with this by idea of being ready for AI, right? Which is the biggest challenge that we see is that ultimately, you know, one of the biggest challenges of content, just full stop, in any business is that it's not a process. It's not there is no collaborative, coordinated communication with those that are creating content. It's for years, it's been the biggest challenge in a content strategy is how do you coordinate the communications among marketing, sales, PR, comms, the C-suite, all the different siloed groups within a business, coordinating that into a brand voice, into a common voice. Now, some brands do it better than others. Some brands, are tighter on it than others. Some brands are very much more controlled on it than others. But for the most part, almost every brand suffers from some level of a lack of coordination in the way that they speak. So it's not the brand's voice in many ways. It's this is the way that marketing talks about stuff. This is the way that sales talks about stuff. And in varying degree, some of them are good, some of them suck. How many times have we had an amazing thought leadership experience from some wonderful brand only to have it completely ruined by the sales experience, right? Because the salespeople don't know how to speak very well or haven't coordinated their sort of message with the marketing message. And so that is job number one. And in order to be ready for any kind of AI, in other words, so if AI is going to make us faster, more expansive, scale us, create more, ability to do more. Well, if there's no standard, then how can it be improved? There's nothing to make more efficient or nothing to make more effective because there's nothing that we actually have as a coordinated level of communication anyway. So it's so important that just to your point, that you have to define what that brand's voice is and put in the processes, the operational parts, the governance part to actually make that a reality so that the brand does have a consistent, cohesive, and scalable voice. Now we can talk about using technology to make it more efficient or effective.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the old days, we would say if you could rip the banner off the top of your website and it sounds like everybody else, it feels like everybody else, you're not differentiated. Well,
That's right.
now if we rip your picture, the byline, the bottom of that off there, do I still hear you? Do I still hear that as your brand? So it is, I think what makes me laugh is the whole idea of prompt engineering,
Yes.
because it's not, I mean, and I get it, by the way. I love asking questions. I would say naturally, I'm a prompt engineer. I'm asking you
Sure.
questions and you're giving me answers. Okay. But just because I ask a question doesn't mean that everybody's going to answer it the same way or that it's even going to sound like anything I said. So
Of
we have
course.
to start with that definition of what is our brand voice? What do we want
Yes.
to sound like? Are we fun? Are we serious? Are we scientific? Are we mathematic? Are we casual? Are we
Right.
formal? All those good things. So if we get those and we have a process, I love that, right? We have a process, we have a system for creating content. Well, now we can move forward. So talk to me about that, Robert. I mean, first, if I'm going to harness my brand voice, do I have to be everywhere?
No, 100% no, right? I mean, this is the thing that sort of flies in the face of the whole hustle. You have to, I've always hated the term omni-channel marketing, right? Because it assumes that we have to assume some godlike posture and basically be every single place on the internet. And of course we don't. If our content is good enough, it will be literally a flame that which the moths, are attracted, right? So, do you have to understand where your audience is in order to make them want to come to where you want to bring them into your sphere of influence, whether that's your website or your blog or your, whatever experience you're creating? Of course. Yes, of course you do. But the idea is that you can't be everywhere. I don't care how big your business is. You simply can't be everywhere, certainly not at any level of quality. And then second, you don't have to be everywhere because your audience isn't everywhere. And so the idea here of harnessing, I've said, it's your tweetable moment or whatever, many, many times that, 90% of a great content strategy has nothing to do with the content you create. It is everything about how you coordinate your communication, your business's communication with each other, right? It's the single most important thing that are lacking in most businesses when we talk about creating brand content, creating marketing content, creating sales content, is there's just a lack of coordinated communication in between those groups. And so what we end up doing is creating so much duplicative content, so much stuff that sort of even competes with one another. I mean, I can't tell you how many businesses I've had the conversation with where I go, hey, why isn't there just something simple like, why isn't there a link to your blog on the front page of your website? And they're like, well, if we put a link on the front page of our website, then the web team gets mad because we're competing for the same traffic that they are, and they don't get their, they don't get their KPIs for traffic because it bleeds off traffic to our blog, and so they won't put a link to the to our blog on the front page of the website. It's like, okay, that's a problem, right? That's an issue. If you're competing for traffic in the same company at the same part of the buyer's journey, well, then somebody's in the wrong spot. Somebody's in the wrong seat. So it's literally just figuring out how are we working together in a coordinated fashion to make content a function in the business like every other function, marketing, sales, legal, sales, all the things that we do, making it a coordinated function is just smart business.
Yeah. Well, and it's necessary business beyond even smart. It's necessary to stay alive now because we spend so much time trying to get in front of customers. But if we don't educate them on the front end, if we don't tell them anything on the front
100%.
end, we spend so much time even qualifying to see if they need a conversation, if they need our help, that we just lose.
Yeah. I mean, that attention is precious, right? I mean, it is, it's not there's no secret here, right? I mean, right now it is noisy, it is hard, it is messy, it is difficult to get customers' attention, our audience's attention, probably even more appropriately, right? It's just hard. So once you have it, like if you create something that is actually good and actually resonates with someone and actually gets their attention, you better keep it. You better really have them want to go on to whatever the best next experience with you that there is. There's so much of what we got wrapped around the axle with SEO and everything. I call it settling bar bet content, right? Where we create so much content that all it does is settle a bar bet, right? It's like you're in a bar and you're like, what's the answer to that thing that we were trying to figure out? And it's like, oh, look it up. Boom. It's the front page of your website, answers the question, they stick their phone back in their pocket, never to come back to your website again. It's like, how do we get them to actually go, well, that's interesting. It answers the question, but I'd actually like to bookmark that, right? I'd actually like to come back to that and have another experience, right? That's the reaction we want. And so putting our care into feeding into that level of experience for our customers is such an important piece of what we do. Who cares how much traffic you get if they all bounce away?
Yeah, that bounce rate is so critical
Yeah.
that we have to keep that low. I'm thinking about an article that I recently wrote, and I'm as you're saying that, I'm like, ooh, did I give them a chance to go deeper? Or did I just end with a thunk and then my thought? So I'm gonna have to go back and review my own content to make sure that I did that well. So how to help me here, Robert? How do we do that better so that we can actually harness that power, man? Because once I got it dialed in, obviously I want inquiries. I want, I want something. I want them, to your point, I want them to bookmark it. I want them to share it. I'd love for them to book a demo. I'd love for them to talk to me, whatever that is, right? Maybe you fill out the contact form. How do I do that without just, saying, hey, Robert, here's what I want you to do?
Sure. Well, that's one. Literally, this is the classic Kramer from Seinfeld, right? When he did the movie lines, like, why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you'd like to see, right? It's like, why don't you just tell your customer what you'd like them to do next? I mean, it's so interesting to me that we get wrapped into this sort of weird sort of game that we're trying to play to cleverly get them to do something that we won't actually tell them what's going to happen next, right? Because if we tell them what's going to happen next, maybe they won't do it. Why don't you just tell them that, hey, fill out this form and a salesperson is going to call you? And you're like, no, I can't do that. Because why? Well, because that's really what's going to happen. And so we have to ask ourselves, why are we not saying what's going to happen when you fill out that lead form, or when you fill out that? Is it because we're ashamed of it? Is it because we don't want that to happen, but we get it credited to our little, pile of chips that sort of stack up in the corner of goodwill from the boss? So number one, I say, is every experience that you create, whether it's a blog, whether it's your website, whether it's an email newsletter, understand what its objective is. Is it trying to move an audience? In other words, are we trying to move someone along a buyer's journey? Perfectly reasonable, perfectly thing, but be clear about it. Acknowledge it. Just say, yes, this is what this is supposed to do. Or is it building an audience? Is it built to say, hey, I want you to subscribe because I'm going to deliver you something valuable. I'm going to create more stuff like this so that you get value out of what I'm saying. So be really clear about whether you're building an audience or moving an audience. And then once you're clear on that, then every piece of content has a connection to whatever the best next experience that they should take is, right? So that blog post, what do you want them to do next? Do you want them to read another blog? Do you want them to sign up for a webinar? Do you want them to do you want them to fill out a form to be a lead? Just be clear. Just be really super clear about what it is you want them to do next, and make it really obvious about what it is that they should do next, and be proud of it. Just acknowledge it. That's the real key here.
Yeah, that's so interesting because marketing is often afraid to say, and the next step is you talk to a salesperson.
Right.
Like, why? Why are we afraid of that, Robert? Why?
Yeah.
I mean, you've consulted with tons of companies at the Content Advisory. Why is that the case?
Well, there's a tension, right? There's a tension that has built up over the last few years between marketing and selling, right? Which is, marketing wants to optimize it goes a little bit back to what we were talking about optimizing the attention that we get, right? It's so difficult to get attention, whether it's from an ad, whether it's from a piece of content, whether it's from an event we're doing. So there's an inherent tension of marketers saying, I don't want to lose anybody, right? I don't want to, I want to keep them strung along, basically, as far as I possibly can, because I get credit for that. That's how I earn my keep here in this business, is the more people that I convert into, the classic is MQLs, or, whatever it is, I get credit for that. And then sales, of course, is built on a different premise altogether. Sales is built on, how many people can I convert? How many people can, of those people that are strung along, how many of them can I convert into revenue? So it's a weirdly contentious relationship. And so what we don't do is acknowledge that there's value in both. There's value in pausing someone on a buyer's journey so that they become an audience, because they're not ready yet. They're not, they're just becoming aware. They're just becoming interested. So purposely create the friction of them pausing into becoming an audience, where all we're going to do is continue to deliver value. And there's a value in making sure that we're seamless in the way that we move someone. And so it's really getting those goals and objectives super clear about the experience. How often do we see an argument, right, on a blog, where the salespeople are like, you got to put more calls to action in. You got to put more, the logo has to pop more. I need more leads. Give me the Glengarry leads. And the marketers are like, no, it's all about SEO and engagement and time on site and, blah, blah, blah. And both of them are right, but both of them are also wrong, because we haven't established a clear goal or objective for whatever that experience is supposed to do. So the number one thing I always talk to clients about is, how clear are we on the connected experiences that we have through that customer's journey? Our website, our blog, our newsletter, our resource center, our digital magazine, all of those things. How clear are we on the business objectives of what they're trying to achieve? And then make sure that everybody is aware of it, because then now we can say, yes, we're succeeding here. We're struggling here. We need to put more pressure here. We need to put more pressure there. We know the levers that we can push and pull.
Yeah. Wow. So on a very small micro level, every piece of content should have that idea of, hey, here's where it is. Is it building audience? Is it growing awareness? Is it moving them down the buyer's journey? Is this right before they book with a salesperson? What is this? And then
Exactly.
on the big level, you're saying, and correct me here if I'm wrong, you're saying we need to be really clear about where that all fits together so that when sales says, I want more leads, we can say, well, we've created 31 articles that are going to generate more leads and 7 webinars. We have all of that. Are you converting those? What are we doing with that?
That's
Am I
right.
getting this right?
It's it comes down to now, once we have sorted out all of the goals and objectives of each of those experiences, right? And so now we can start having a real conversation with sales, marketing, the C-suite, and say, where do we need to optimize? So I used to draw when I was the CMO of a software company. What I would do is I'm old school, so I would draw it as a funnel. I know the funnel is sort of an antiquated idea these days, but I would still draw it as a funnel. And I would know my conversion rates, right? I would know my conversion rates at each stage, right? From literally awareness to visitor, visitor to lead, lead to opportunity, opportunity to cut, all the way through down through customer loyalty. Like I knew what those conversion rates are. I knew how many I needed to get my revenue targets. I knew, those were numbers that were seared on my forehead. That has really gone by the wayside in so many ways today, because integrated marketing planning, by the way, has gone by the wayside in so many businesses today. We're all sort of operating in our own silos, which are typically siloed on the customer's journey. It's like there's a brand team and all they're concerned about is the brand stuff. And then there's a web team and all they're concerned about is website. And then there's a demand gen team, and the demand gen team is all they're concerned about is how many leads we're getting. And so that sets up that contentious relationship. And so having everybody care about all of those conversion rates gives us common objectives so that we can start to say, we're not blaming the people. We're not blaming the teams for not performing. We're saying, here's where we're weak and we need to put all our efforts into that area so that we basically generate more MQLs, or so that we generate more. We know if we put more butts in the seat, we'll get more demos, we'll get more business. Or we know if we get more traffic, we'll get more da-da-da-da. We know we're having a struggle that because sales is not closing the leads we're giving them. Why is that? Are the leads just not good? Or are they struggling because they don't have the right content to facilitate that? Well, now because we have the right information, the right intent information, well, now we can make those decisions. And so it's all, so much of it, like I said, is about coordinating our efforts. And that's the thing that's mostly missing in marketing and sales today.
Wow. Wow. So to really harness the power of our brand's voice, maybe we need to take a step back and go a little more old school here. And we need to focus on where we all fit, or maybe
it is. I mean, so it's so much. It's so funny because, I'm often the bearer of, I feel a little bit like the parent with the spoonful of medicine saying, here comes the airplane, here comes the airplane, here comes, sort of that kind of thing, because what everybody wants to talk about is cool thought leadership, storytelling, stuff like that. And trust me, I like talking about that stuff more. But you got to clean your room first, right? You got to make sure that the garage is clean, because if the garage isn't clean, you don't know where anything is and you can't figure stuff out. So it's not the sexiest work, figuring out workflow and governance and process and team charters and coordination of experiences and goals and objectives and building measurement pyramids. All that stuff is none of it's hard work and it's tough work and it's not the fun stuff. And so but you got to do it. You just have to do it, because that's what makes the fun stuff really fun.
Yeah. Well, that's what gives us the opportunity to do the fun stuff.
Exactly.
Because if we're doing it in the closet, we're going to get no results.
That's right.
We need to clean our room first. So I love that. So Robert, I've got a couple more questions here. Before we do though, friends, if you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, Robert's brilliant, because that's what I'm saying here, I encourage you to go get a copy of Robert's book, Content Marketing Strategy, Harness the Power of Your Brand's Voice. You can go to koganpage.com, put in Kogan Page 20, you get 20% off.
Boom.
For that. You can pay full price if you want to go to Amazon, but I tell you, go to Kogan Page directly and get that. So with that, Robert, we've talked so much about this alignment and this voice and all of this, and that's often not as fun, not as sexy as we'd like it to be. So before I ask kind of the final question here, give me look in the future. You've seen the past. You are so experienced in this. What do you think is next? What do you think is next for our brand's voice that we're gonna need to do that maybe we're not thinking of?
I'll say it like this, and I think this is directly influenced by the burst of AI. One of the things that I've talked a lot about is marketing technology, just generally speaking, beyond AI, but just, marketing automation, email marketing, all those kinds of things. And for so long, what has been because of the lack of coordination, because of the lack of process, because of the lack, sort of most organizations, marketing stuff just happens, right? I mean, it's just, there's not a lot of sort of coordination and process and governance involved. It's just like, we got a lot of stuff to do and just people do it, right? Just, so there's lots of, Jacks and Jills of all trades, right? It's a very, very generalist type of organization. And if you compare that, and if you look at, to say, accounting or the legal group or even sales to some extent, but or finance, whatever it is, other parts of the business, there are people who do very specific things and are, it's the more T-shaped, sort of skill sets, right? Where you're broad, but you have a very deep level of experience in this. And we have often shied away from that in marketing, right? This idea of being deeply expert at something, and especially technology. And in fact, technology vendors have lived and breathed this forever, right? How many times have you seen the value proposition of, we make it easy for business users to do X? We make it super simple to do the most sophisticated marketing automation that you've ever seen. And it's not. It's just not. Digital marketing, content marketing, all these things are complex systems. They are hard. They're difficult. They need specialized attention and expertise, data science, journalism, UI, UX, SEO, very, very specialized, deep levels of expertise. And we just have to recognize that. Marketing is not just something that everybody does, right? It has to be the same level of rigor that we put to other professions. And so I think AI, in a weird way, and this goes back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, is forcing us to realize that. It's forcing us to realize that this stuff is really hard. The human aspects of this is really difficult and challenging. And we need to put the same level of rigor. Marketing forever, and this is especially true in B2B, but marketing forever has been sort of considered, it's the thing we do when, it's sort of like, I've had so many CEOs go, marketing's a tax that I have to pay, and I just try not to pay as much tax as I possibly can, right? It's marketing is always seen as sort of like this thing, this weird thing, all they care about is the Pantone colors and the Super Bowl commercials. It's like, no, it is a deeply expert practice that has to be treated as such in business. That's what's next, I think. I think marketing becomes as important as every other function in the business, and content becomes an important function within that. So that's what I think is next.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. Before we wrap up here, I want to encourage folks, get more from Robert Rose at contentadvisory.net. Get a copy of the book, Content Marketing Strategy. Fantastic stuff. Robert's got so much insight. Robert, I always loved listening to you. I've listened to your podcast for years. This old brand was always been fun. Our marketing, the other marketing stuff that you've done. I mean, you're just synonymous to me anyway with content marketing. So thank you
very much.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. So with that, take us home, Robert. How do we get started harnessing the power of our brand's voice? You can share something you already have or give me something new, but I think if we wrap this up, get us started on the journey.
Sure. I think the best way to get started is to find your colleague, and literally it may be you and your boss, right? It may be you and your partner. It may be you and the people that you work with on your team, depending on the size of your business. But the real key is look at every experience that you have today and ask, like every experience, like your newsletter, your podcast, your website, your resource center, all the different places where your customers are interacting with you. and ask two questions. One is, do we understand what its goals and objectives are? And two, if we understand its goals and objectives, are they as important as the products and services that we put into the marketplace? If your website, if your blog isn't as important as the products you sell, you need to question why you have a blog. You need to question why you have that podcast. You need to question, because they are just as important, because they are the experiences that your customers will come to know and love you through. So if you can answer those two questions in the affirmative, that yes, they are as important, and two, we do have specific goals, you're on your way. If not, make that step first. Now start figuring out how to connect them all together in a way that the best next experience is the best next experience, right? It's not something that you're just like, putting off to the side. And start working on making them great.
Awesome. I love that. Well, I screwed up the name of your podcast. It's This Old Marketing. I'm
That's
looking
right.
at the title of your book. I see This Old Brand. Sorry about that. But
It's all right.
Get a copy, friends, of Content Marketing Strategy. Get to know Robert Rose more and get started on your journey. Lots of great stuff today, Robert, as expected. Thank you for spending some time with me, and thanks for writing a fantastic book. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, my friend. I so appreciate you having me on the show.
My pleasure.